will there be a...
I'll let you know later on.
Okay, good, good.
Check if people can hear us all right.
Yes, so if I speak, probably, I hope I am audible.
Yes. Okay, so we are live, and I think people can join us now. Hi everybody, welcome to Caravan. This is ईशान शर्मा and आज बहुत एक खास टॉपिक पे हम डिस्कशन करेंगे विच शुड बी इन इंग्लिश बट आई थॉट आई वुड स्टार्ट इन हिंदुस्तानी जो कि आज हिंदुस्तानी तीन भाषाओं का एक कॉन्फ्लुएंस हो गया है जिसमें हम इंग्लिश वर्ड्स भी यूज कर रहे हैं, कुछ फारसी के शब्द इस्तेमाल होते हैं, कुछ उर्दू, कुछ हिंदी, हर तरीके की भाषाएं मिलके जो हम आज बोलते हैं. एंड आई थिंक इट वाज इंदिरा गांधी हु सेड दैट इंडियंस आर इलिटरेट इन थ्री लैंग्वेजेस, Hindi, English, and their mother tongue. So, we benefit out of that illiteracy in a very good way, that we get to learn a lot of languages and present it in whichever format, in whichever fashion that the Gen Z, the Generation Z love. So, welcome to yet another Carvan Live lecture. And I am delighted to I'm honored to host Dr. Imre Bangha today. He's joining from Oxford this evening to talk about Hindustani in Mughal era. Because when we think of Mughal era in the common parlance, we associate it with either Urdu or Persian or nowadays Sanskrit with the new researches that are coming up. But I think we are now going to explore the Hindustani realm today. So I don't know. I don't think that Dr. Banga needs any introduction to people of history, but those who are not from the field, I would just read out a small introduction for our speaker today. Dr. Imre Banga, an associate professor of Hindi at the Faculty of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies, Wolfson College, specializes in Old Hindi poetry. His research covers the evolution of literary idioms, manuscript cultures, and Riti poetry. Dr. Banga focuses on individual poets like Kabir and Tulsidas alongside exploring the cultural interactions between India and Hungary and the global impact of Rabindranath Tagore that he has already done. I think he did his PhD in Hindi from Shanti Niketan, if I'm not mistaken, and he has engaged in impactful projects. He worked on critical editions and translations of early modern Hindi texts, including projects of Sant poet Bajed and Tulsidas's Kavitavali, and many other texts that we might explore in this presentation as well. So we are really, really honored, Dr. Banga. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. And over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma, for this generous introduction, and I welcome all people who have joined online, either via Zoom or listening on YouTube. अब मदर टंग डे, मातृभाषा दिवस के नज़दीक हैं हम, और इसी वजह से मैंने सोचा था कि अच्छा रहेगा अगर मैं ज़बानों के बारे में कुछ बातें करूँगा, और इसी वजह से मैं हिंदुस्तानी के बारे में बात करूँगा, लेकिन हिंदुस्तानी के बारे में उसी हिंदुस्तानी के बारे में नहीं जो 20वीं सदी की हिंदुस्तानी है, जो हिंदी उर्दू को मिलाना चाहती थी, लेकिन हिंदी और उर्दू से पहले के हिंदुस्तानी के बारे में बात करूंगा. So Hindustani in the Mughal era, and I will be talking in English. I would have loved to give this talk in Hindustani, and I always regret that the discourse about Indian languages is more and more in English and not in the Indian languages, Bengali, Marathi, Tamil, Urdu, or the great Indian languages, which have fantastic literary and cultural traditions and carry incredible wealth within them. I'm going to share my slides and try to fit my talk within 1 hour. So here we go. I think I am sharing, and let me just start the slideshow. Yes, Um, so, Hindustani in the Mughal era. Just briefly, what I'm going to talk about is my argument is that Hindustani was North India's contact language in the early modern world, which more or less corresponds to the Mughal era. And Hindustani became this contact language in the 14th century. We have recordings of mentions of Hindustani from the 15th century. And until the emergence of standardized Urdu and modern Hindi in the 18th and the 19th centuries, this Hindustani was the lingua franca of North India. I will also examine the literary and the practical real-life locales where this language was documented to have been used. And also I will briefly touch on how Hindustani was becoming a global language, because visiting English, Dutch, French, Italian travelers had to learn Hindustani. It was not English at that time, but Hindustani that served as the contact language with Europeans, and they also had their share of involvement in documenting and using and also describing Hindustani in the 17th and the 18th centuries. Now, Hindustani has been discredited on many accounts, saying that this is a failed attempt by Gandhi to mix Hindi and Urdu together. Nowadays, I only know one great name who is a protagonist of Hindustani, that's Salman Rushdie, who again and again describes his mother tongue as Hindustani. But I'm going to talk about the roots of Hindustani and how it has been documented. Now, the documentation of Hindustani is quite elusive, and I had to rely on the help of various people, amongst them Murali Ranganathan from Mumbai, Nandini Chatterjee in Exeter, who is an incoming professor in Oxford, and Avadhesh Pradhan from India. And my research draws heavily on the research of Ramvilas Sharma. Again, I feel a neglected literary historian of Hindi, among other things, and his work is still authoritative, even many decades after he is not with us. As I mentioned, Hindustani is elusive, and I would like to quote something from Grierson. This is early Grierson, so not the Grierson of the Linguistic Survey of India. His notions kept developing. But this is what Grierson had to say about the emergence of Hindi and Fort William College. The early 19th century witnessed the birth of that wonderful hybrid language known to Europeans as Hindi and invented by them. In 1803, under Gilchrist's tuition, Laluji Lal wrote the Prem Sagar, with this peculiarity that he used only nouns and particles of Indian instead of those of Arabic or Persian origin. The result was practically a newly invented speech. Its prose in one uniform artificial dialect, the mother tongue of no native born in India, was forced into acceptance by the prestige of its inventors, by the fact that the first books written in it were of a highly popular character, and because it found a sphere in which it was eminently useful. So this is Grierson. And I think his ideas have been internalized by many Indians, that it is the British who invented Hindi. And these ideas are deeply rooted in Grierson's perception of Fort William College and many other colonial administrators and scholars' perceptions of the road of Fort William College. Now, I would like to counterpoint this idea of an extreme colonial intervention by referring to Norbert Peabody's work on knowledge formation in colonial India, in which he emphasized that Indians were also agents in forming the knowledge about India. And if not all, there were certain key indigenous groups within the Indians who provided information to the British on which they have made their decisions. Now, Hindustani was first a practical language for oral interaction. And it appeared in literary manuscripts in North India, and here I'm talking only about North India, as Rekhtas, or about typo in Persian script from the 16th century. In the Nagari script from the 17th century, we have manuscripts, and we also have prose from the late 17th century. From around 1700, we have two grammars of Hindustani produced by two Europeans, one a Frenchman and one a Dutchman. And also it appears in official documents in the 18th century. Before I go more into the history of Hindustani, I would like to clarify a few aspects of what we are talking about when we talk about language, because many people mean different things about when they talk about language. Language can be a singular speech form, or it can be an umbrella term for a plethora of speech forms. And people use language switching between these two meanings. Also, there are dialects, which can be called also patois with a French word. And lect is a word when you don't want to talk about whether something is a language or a dialect, when it is not decided and you don't want to go into it, then lect is a useful term to use. And I'm also talking about literary idioms. When a language is used for literature, then that language is elevated. And this elevation happened very much in pre-colonial, but also even colonial India. Languages needed to be elevated for literature. And this elevated language is a literary idiom. And it is not identical necessarily with a spoken language. There are no universally accepted criteria on how to distinguish two languages. Massacre in the book Indo-Aryan Languages puts forward two criteria: mutual comprehensibility, and you can even examine the percentage of shared vocabulary, and possessing written literature. Mutual comprehensibility is interestingly a Mughal argument. Already Abul Fazl presented the languages of India according to mutual comprehensibility. And he said there are many dialects all over India, but which are mutually non-comprehensible. And then he gave a list of about 15, 20 languages. And there is something which we cannot deny is political and social recognition. And I'm going in the next slide into that question. So in social linguistics, Heinz Kloss has proposed that we can have languages by two different criteria. One is languages by distance, when a language is an island and very clearly distinguishable from the surrounding languages, like Japanese is clearly distinguished from anything that is outside Japanese. English is also quite clearly distinguished from anything that is outside the British Isles, or even within like Welsh or Irish. Hungarian, my mother tongue, is also a language like this. It's a language island in the middle of Europe. Or Basque, a language island in the Pyrenees between France and Spain. So these are languages where there is no question that they are different languages. However, when there is a language continuum, a dialect continuum like the Slavonic languages, and we see it with Russia's invasion of Ukrainian, that Russia would be claiming that Ukrainians are in fact Russians and Ukrainian is a dialect of Russian. So here, there have been lots of instances of dialectization. For example, fascist Spain tried to dialectize Catalan and say that Catalan is just a dialect of Spanish. So against dialectization, there is language buildup, that you build up an infrastructure, a social and cultural infrastructure for a language. This is the case with languages within a dialect continuum. So this is Gujarati has its own infrastructure. Hindi has its own infrastructure. Bengali has its own infrastructure. And Assamese has its own infrastructure. Some languages are building themselves up, like Rajasthani, trying to assert an independent identity from Hindi. So there is a language buildup, which is a very dynamic process. And how does language buildup work? You would use language in the lowest level for purely humorous or folkloristic use. And that can be that we can make great jokes in Hindi or Urdu, but otherwise we speak in English. A higher level is lyric poetry, when you appreciate the lyric poetry in a certain language or in a certain lect. Prose literature is even higher level. Normally it appears after lyric poetry. Expository prose is an even higher level. This is how Heinz Kloss has proposed a language buildup, and technical and scientific writing and government use is the highest level. Now you can just imagine Indian languages to what level they are used, and you can also see the dynamics that in the 20th century they were going upwards, and in the 21st century very often they are going downwards. Now I just skip this. Now this is an image in a language that apparently seemed to be Arabic or Persian. And in fact, what is written in red on the top is Persian, but then what follows is neither Arabic nor Persian, but it is Hindavi. It is Chandayan, and many of you might have been familiar with the images. This is the Manchester Chandayan, which is available online. So it is Hindavi from the late 14th century, and this manuscript might be around 1500. So much later than the composition of the text, but the text was composed in the Turkey script, in the Perso-Arabic script, and even the poet himself says that Turki likhi likhi Hinduki gai. So while writing Turkey, I was singing in Hinduki, in the Hindavi language. Now, another example. This is Gurmukhi script, and many of you know, and that in Delhi you will find it everywhere in the central places that Gurmukhi is used for naming the streets. And Gurmukhi is very closely associated with Punjabi, but this is a modern perception. This is Braj Bhasha in the Gurmukhi script. And this is another script that's a Kaithi script, and this is Braj Bhasha again in the Kaithi script. And here we have got Bengali script, and then we have got the Urdu script. And in fact, this is the first published poem in print in Braj Bhasha from the 1780s, from the Calcutta Gazette. So all of these are Braj Bhasha, and I didn't show you any Devanagari examples. The first example was Awadhi, not Braj Bhasha. So this is the graphic situation with the languages in before print modernity. We call this polygraphia, that languages are written in various scripts. When the BBC was preparing their program about the Mughals about 20 or 15 years ago, I got a phone call in my office from the BBC asking me, can you tell us what languages did the Mughals speak? Oops, good question. Now, a good answer would be this poem by Abdur Rahim Khane Khanan, which is a multilingual poem and shows what languages Abdur Rahim Khane Khanan, or popularly known as Rahim in Hindi poetry, used. He used Sanskrit, Braj, Gujarati, Marathi, Rajasthani, Khadi Boli. Khadi Boli is Kharacha Bahut Hai. So very modern, and even the problem might be quite modern. But interestingly, he was also exposed to Telugu, and Telugu was the exemplary Dravidian language not Tamil, not Kannada, even though the Vijayanagara Empire, Hampi is in Karnataka. Its language was Telugu and primarily Telugu and Persian. So Odipova Chinnadu is Telugu. So this is what Rahim knew. And this is a Mughal horizon of actively using languages. It has been a cosmopolitan world around 1600, with Persian, Sanskrit, and Arabic at play in amongst the cosmopolitan languages. The vernaculars were two types, transregional and regional. What I mean by transregional is that, for example, Dakhani was used in Maharashtra, Karnataka, Telangana. Brajabuli, which is not Brajabhasha, was used in Bengal, Assam, Mithila, Oriya, Orissa, etc. And various versions of Old Hindi were used before what we would call the modern Hindi belt. So Hindavi, Awadhi was used beyond Awadh. Rekhta, about which I'm going to talk later. Braj Bhasha was used as in Maharashtra, in Punjab, in Bengal, and Sant Bhasha, again, we have early documentation from the 16th century being used in Lahore, for example. Sant Bhasha is the Sadhukari of Kabir and the Sants. And regional languages are much more closely linked to a region, like Rajasthani, Gujarati. Instead of Rajasthani, I should have said probably Marwari at that time, because Rajasthani is a modern term. Okay. Now, European type print modernity assumed that a single language can be used at each sphere of life. However, this was not the case before colonial modernity. Different languages might have been used in different spheres of a cultivated man's life. For example, they would speak differently to the women of the household, they would speak differently in the bazaar, and they would speak differently when they attend the darbar. An important thing is the absence of Urdu. The earliest recorded Hindavi poetry from Sultanate times that is attributed to North Indian Muslims is not in Khariboli, but in an idiom close to Braj and to the mixed idiom of the Sant Bhasha or Sadhukari. Now, there has been experimentation and dynamism with the languages, and Rehta will be one of the most important issues in my discussion as we follow. And Rehta initially meant mixed language compositions. Braj Bhasha occupies more and more space of Sanskrit learning and also mediates Sanskrit learning towards Persian. Also, the naming changes. For example, the language of the exalted court, which in Persian is Zabane Urdu-e Mu'alla, in 1700 refers to Persian. By 1800, Zabane Urdu-e Mu'alla refers to Urdu. So there is a dynamism within the language ecology. And I would like to talk also about homeless texts. Muhammad Tawakkoli Targhi coined this term homeless text when he talked about the Indo-Persian texts in 2001, how much they have been neglected and no epistemological space left for them in the context of new language ideologies. I would like to expand this idea of homeless texts to early Rehta texts, especially Rehta in the Nagari script. And here is an example of Rehta in the Nagari script. दिल की दिलासा सारी दुनी का तमाशा कुली गम का करार दुनी देखे जी से ऊब है वाकी मोहब्बत देखें खातिर मैं यूं क्यों आवे आलम की साहिबी तो ऐसी जैसी दूब है राग खूब रंग खूब etc. उमर की खूबी पर खलक ही यार हुआ. So you can see it is very much the Khariboli grammar that is present in modern Hindi, with slight differences in morphology and in spelling, but otherwise it is the same Khari Boli. It is non-standardized, unlike Urdu or modern Hindi. And this is what I call rekhta. And rekhta will be is a term that denotes the literary version of Hindustani. So, Hindustani. Um, in the first occurrence of Hindustana Bhasha comes from Kashmir from the 15th century, from Srivara's Rajatarangini, that talks about a king who was able to compose poetry, not also apart from Sanskrit and Kashmiri, in Persian and in Hindustani Bhasha. We don't know what Hindustani Bhasha is, but if it is if it is paralleled with Sanskrit and Persian, we can and Kashmiri, we can assume that it referred to Hindustani. And that assumption can be confirmed by the Babur Nama, which comes a couple of decades later. And Babur talked to Daulat Khan Lodi in Hindustani via an interpreter. And this is really telling. Daulat Khan Lodi was a Lodi nobleman, perhaps second in the empire or very high ranking in the empire. He was the governor of Punjab. And he did not know Persian, but he spoke Hindustani, and Babur had to ask for a Hindustani interpreter. Also, there are Hindustani words in the Babur Nama, like Banamanus, which is the gray monkey, Galhari, squirrel, Khanda for Khadga, Katar, Kumudini, Istambha. These words can be recognized in modern language. Also, Babur produced poetry, Rekhta poetry, in a mixed language. And I will show that poem later. We hear about Europeans learning Hindustani. The first mention comes from 1617, and I will talk a bit more about Manucci, who was present in the middle of the 17th century and the latter half of the 17th century in North India. And we know that Hindustani was spoken by Shivaji when he visited the Mughal camp, and we have direct documentation of that. Bharat Chandra Rai, a great Bengali poet, also states that he knew Hindustani. So when Babur talked to Daulat Khan Lodi, and this is a translation of the Babur Nama, that I desired a man who understood the Hindustani language to explain to him what I said, sentence by sentence. Now, the European involvement, what we know is that Europeans produced grammars. And here we see two grammar books. One is in Dutch, the other one is a Latin grammar. And you can see one was produced by a Dutch, one would say, adventurer, Johan Joshua Catelaar. The other one by a Catholic missionary, François-Marie de Tours. Niccolò Manucci, in the late 17th century, in 1665, talks about his being present in the camp of Mansingh, of Jaipur. And he mentions how Shivaji came over when he was playing cards with Mansingh. And what he says about the camp is, I possessed, like anyone else in the camp, the Persian and Hindustan languages. And talks about Shivaji, that I gave him information about the greatness of European kings, he being of opinion that there was not in Europe any other king than the king of Portugal. This is something that I, as a Hungarian, often encounter in India when I am called Angres, as if there hadn't been any other nation in Europe. also Manucci, in another place, talks of Jacob, a Dutch surgeon who fled to Agra, but was unable to speak Moors. Moors is another name of Hindustani. And his mention that he was unable to speak Moors means that Europeans, being in India for longer periods, were expected to know the Hindustani language. John Fryer, a few years after Manucci, or Manucci's account. Manucci's account is later, but he talked about events in 1665. So John Fryer is a doctor of the East India Company, and he says that the language at court is Persian, that commonly spoke is Hindustan, for which they have no proper character, the language, the written language being called Banyan. That must be a misunderstanding. I don't know what it comes from, maybe Brahmin, or which is a mixture of Persian and Slavonian, that means Indian vernacular, as are all the dialects of India. And this is something, another question, that all the languages of India, Bengali, Marathi, assumed Persian vocabulary by the 17th century. No, Hindustani, this is practical, these are kind of insights into the practical use of Hindustani. But the literary use of Hindustani was also present. Hindustani had three different literary forms before 1720. I say 1720 because after 1720, Wali Aurangabadi's Divan becomes popular in Delhi, and everyone starts to write poetry imitating its style, and that's the emergence of modern Urdu. So before the emergence of modern Urdu, we have got Dakkani, Gujri, and Rekhta, which for some time also continue parallel with modern Urdu. There is a lack of standardization in these literary forms. Also, they are based on Dehlavi, on the dialect of Delhi, and there is a recent brilliant doctoral dissertation by Joshua Pien, who argues convincingly that unlike earlier academic attempts that linked Dakkani to Marathi, or Gujri to Gujarati, or Dakkani to Punjabi, it is in fact the dialect of Delhi that has spread with the first move of the to Daulatabad during Muhammad Tughlaq's reign and moved to the south. Now, Rekhta in the north. So the northern variety of literary Hindustani is called Rekhta by its authors, whether composing in the Urdu or in the Nagari scripts. And it is not linked to writing systems. And you remember John Fryer's comment that it is not linked to writing systems. So this is really an important thing. But there is a very rich archive of Rekhta poetry that hasn't been explored. I have produced an article more than 10 years ago about Rekhta poetry in mixed language, but since then I have found an enormous lot of Rekhta poetry coming from North India in the Nagari script. Also, an important development is the emergence of Sanskritized Hindi prose from the late 17th century. Now, when Hindustani is not used as a literary language, then it is used for practical transactions. And this is a translation from the grammar introduction of François-Marie de Tours. The use of this Indian or Mogholian language, this must be his coinage, the Mughal language, in all its details, may be a most easy and indispensable practicability, supplying a method that may lead the missionaries in their undertakings of mission, help the merchants in their practicing of business, and always accompany wayfarers when following roads, traversing and wandering through different regions. It seems suitable to leave aside the Brahmanic, that is Sanskrit, and the vernacular languages, and to keep to the Indian or the Mogholian and study and engage in discourse according to its rules and laws. And the grammar is the grammar of Hindustani, of modern Khariboli, but with archaisms. So that's a view from a missionary. But an interesting view comes from Prannath, who is also a missionary, but within Hinduism, who founded the Pranami sect. And he also talks about the practicability of Hindustani. He says, "Sabko pyari apni jo hai kul ki bhak, ab kahun bhakha mein kinaki, yamen to bhakha hai lakh, बिना हिसाबे बोलियां मिने सकल जहान सबको सुगम जान के कहूंगी हिंदुस्तान." So everyone prefers the language of his own family. सबको प्यारी अपनी जो है कुल की भाख है. And he says that I will speak in Hindustan since I consider it accessible, Sugama, to everyone, Sabko Sugama. And around the same decades, we have Hindustani in the Mughal camp, and this is a letter dated 15th May 1666 in the Dundhari dialect. Dundhari is the dialect spoken around Jaipur. And the crown prince of Jaipur was in the Mughal camp, and Parkal Das is a munshi who sends regular reports back to Jaipur to another munshi. And in that report, I underline the Hindustani sentences. This is how Shivaji refuses to get into the Mughal service and refuses to accept a siropa, a kilat, the robe of honor donated by the emperor. So then Shivaji said, "मैं सिरोपा न लूं, मुझे पातशाह जी जसवंत सिंह सो तलो खड़ा गौर करी खड़ा करो." सो मैं ऐसा आदमी हूं जो मुझे असो गौर करीने खड़ा करो. मैं पातशाह जी का मनसब नहीं लेता, चाकर नहीं रहता. मुझे मारियो चाहो तो मारो, कैद में किया चाहो कैद में करो, सरोपाव न पहरूं. You can see that the future is not used to saropana perunga, and also not the ending is still on, very close to Braj Bhasha. Also, we hear in the letter the words of the emperor when the Padshah ji, you see, Aurangzeb, talks to Prince of Jaipur. अबार तुम उसको अपने साथ ही ले जाओ, डेरे ले जाए उसे माकुल कीजो. So this is how Aurangzeb talked in this letter. Since the letter is generally in the Dhundhari dialect, and these are much more Khariboli Hindustani quotes, we can think that even if it is not a word-by-word reconstruction, but they are this is reconstruction by the scribe of the linguistic register that was used in the Mughal camp, and this is also mentioned by Manucci, as we have heard. Now, this meeting of Man Singh and Shivaji is also recorded by or referred to by Bharat Chandra Rai half a century or more later in Bengal. Bharat Chandra Rai is a great Bengali poet who writes in a very refined style. And here, the interesting thing is that he says that it would be proper to reproduce the language of Man Singh and the Padshah in Persian, Paroshi, Arabi, and Hindustani. And then in the second line, he goes, "I have learned all of them and I can also read them, but it's difficult for everyone to understand it. And also in the poetry, it wouldn't be easy to understand and it wouldn't be enjoyable, rasala. Therefore, atayebo kahi bhakha boroni mishala, I only give misals, I only give examples of their language, but I describe them in bhasha, which in this case is Bengali." The important thing is that Bharat Chandra Rai in the 17th century states that I have learned all these languages, and also that Hindustani is used along with Parsi, along with Persian. Now, let's turn back to the literary version of the language, Rechta. The first documented literary use of Rechta, or what I could call Rechta, comes from Babur's Divan. And it's worth really memorizing. It's just a beautiful couplet. And we have got a manuscript from 1529 from Babur's lifetime. So this is what Babur composed. Muchkana hua kuch havase manek moti, fakr ehligabas bulgusidur pani oroti. I had no desire for gems and pearls. For poor people, sufficient are water and bread. An interesting thing about Babur is that he didn't know how to differentiate between ta and ta. So that's why he quite self-confidently rhymed moti with roti. This wouldn't have been acceptable in Indian poetry, but he was an emperor and he can do anything he wants. So this couplet uses Kariboli Muchkana Hua, which stands for Kuch, and Manik, Moti, Pani, Roti, Hindustani words. Otherwise, we have got Persian, Havas E, desire for, and Fakr, Ehliga Bas Bulgusidur is Persian mixed Turkish. Bulgusidur means will be, and Ehliga, Ga is a Turkish suffix meaning for. And then from that time onwards, we find this kind of mixed language compositions. And this is my article about the Rechta, which I am repeating here. There is a very important album produced in 1652 to 56, which is an album of Persian compositions, bayaz, and it has got poetry in mixed language by people called by poets who use the names Jamali, Faizi, Bayram, Jani, Sedan, Fateh Muhammad, Jafar, and an unknown author. So we might even suspect that Faizi, can he be the great Faizi, Akbar's poet laureate? And can Bayram be Bayram Khan, the regent, who just followed Babur in composing mixed language poetry? Jamali is interesting. He composed several, the most substantial poems. Also, another group of people who uses Hindavi and uses Hindustani, the Kariboli, the Dehlavi, for literary purposes are the Mehdavis, who were founded by Miran Sayyid Muhammad of Jaunpur, who died in 1505. And then poets like Sayyid Khandamir Mutafi and Mian Mustafa had Hindustani poetry under their names. So even Miran Sayyid Muhammad of Jaunpur, who later settles down in Gujarat, so Gujri area, uses mixed language poetry in which the mixture is not simply mixing Perso-Arabic nouns into the language, but the language might be Persian that has some Hindustani in it. Agar fazal kuniyak jo jive jive jive. So if you have mercy, then you yak jo. If you have mercy the size of a grain, then you live, you live, you live. Agar adal kuni yak jo. And if you have justice the size of a grain, if you don't administer mere justice for the size of a grain, then you die, 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 mube, mube, mube. And we see Persian poets from Humayun and Akbar's time producing also a few poems in Hindavi. That might be jokes or just for internal usage because it doesn't really takes off as great poetry amongst themselves. So the situation is same as with Amir Khusro, whose Kariboli is inauthentic, and that research has been published by Mahmud Sherani in the middle of the 20th century, but not everyone is happy about this, but I think Mahmud Shehrani's research is really convincing. So Amir Khusro is out of the question, and all the early claims for Kariboli are out of the question. Yeah. So there are poems that appear in an album that was written probably between the 1550s and 1570s. And Behram Sakka Bukhari again writes in the same style as we have just read, Persian in bold typeset, Khar Shudam, Zar Shudam, Loot Gaya, the Rahe Ishke Tu Kamar Tutta Hai. And then Garchi Badam Guft Rakibe Kuttan, Uska Kaha Mat Karo, Ya Jutta Hai. And then Persian, Gah Na Gufta Ki Jamali Tu Bet, Tham Karo, Kya Apna Karam Phutta Hai. So that's the earliest form of rechta, when you mix not just words, but rather full phrases or full sentences or clauses. There have been lots of research about motifs for linguistic hybridity, and I'm not going to delve on it. I would like to follow up with the use of Hindustani, and as I mentioned, Hindustani is used for different. So a person may use different languages in different contexts, and this is best illustrated by a Persian poem called Sard o Garm-i Zamana by Ishki Khan, who may have lived under Akbar but may have lived 100 years later. Written literature posits him under the time of Akbar and even calls him Akbar's Mir Munshi, which cannot be substantiated. Anyway, so it's sometime between Akbar's and Aurangzeb's time. And the poem is in Persian, but it also quotes the words of women. And there is a description of what a woman says to a nobleman who comes home, and this nobleman is apparently rich. So Zani Hindi Ziyak Taraf Guyad, Persian, and then comes the Hindustani. Hon tiri londi tu mira khandagar. तुम मुझको प्यार करते हो, हम भी करती हूँ तिहारा प्यार. अपने कोठे पे मैं बिछाऊं पलंग, उस पर लेट जियो पांव पसार, etc. It goes on. And the interesting thing with Ishki Khan is that he also describes what a wife would say to a husband who is impoverished. So that wife would say, Teri maan goli, tera baap chamar, jhoot tujhte bahut suna, mat bol, sach tira hon kahon mira mat maar, tujhte mujhko na roti o pani, tujhte mujhko nahi sawar o singar. अब न रहूं तेरे खुदा की सौं निकलूंगी तिहारे घर थे बहार. You can see the थे is an archaic equivalent of se. So निकलूंगी तिहारे घर से बहार. I will get out of your house. So this is Rechta, all recorded in the Perso-Arabic script or in the Urdu script. However, Rechta also appears in the Nagari script. The earliest poem that might have been composed by someone whose sayings are recorded in the Nagari script is attributed to Dadu Dayal. And how does Dadu Dayal's Rechta sound? Allah, tera jikar fikar karte hain, आशिक मुस्ताक तेरे तरस मरते हैं. And it goes on. ध्यान तेरा इश्क आगे जरते हैं, जान तेरा जंद तेरा पांव सिर धरते हैं, दादू दीवान तेरा जर खरीद घर के हैं. This is recorded after the death of Dadu Dayal. The earliest recorded manuscript is from 1637, if I remember well. So, but there is no reason to doubt that this was composed by Dadu Dayal, who was a linguistic genius experimenting with fake Persian and various linguistic registers. I have been working on Bajid or Bajind, who was a disciple or is remembered as a disciple of Dadu Dayal. The interesting thing with Bajid is that he might use Rechta already for more clearly Hindu themes like Viraha of the gopis from Krishna. And this is his Rechta. Gopi Gai Gwalanito Behalahem Bihari Bin. Bihari is Krishna, so the gopis, the cows, and the cowherds are dejected Bihal without Bihari, without Krishna. Hotana malum maksud kya tumhara hai. We don't know what is your intention, and it goes inayat rahe, makam kina, etc. You can see the archaic version of the modern language, and just imagine the distance of Savachar so Sal. So it's quite a long linguistic distance, but still it's clearly the Kariboli of the modern Hindi. And an important thing is that this is Krishna poetry, but the mixing of languages is here. So that was just perceived to be natural. If you speak Kariboli, then you mix Persian vocabulary into it. Here is a manuscript version of Bajid's poem. Maybe my cursor is visible. Gopi, Gopi, Gwal, Gayato, Behal, Ham, Bihari, Binu, etc. So it is in the Nagari script, and the manuscript comes from the 17th, 18th century. But also Krishna poets are attributed to compose in Rechta, and this is Swami Haridas, who lived in the 16th century. He was a contemporary of Akbar, and he is even credited to have been visited by Akbar, as you can see here. Akbar in behind, Tansen in front of the ascetic Swami Haridas. And Swami Haridas, the poem is recorded only in the 18th century. So here I wouldn't be so certain as in Dadu's case that we really have the Rechta from such an early time. So this is something that it is recorded in the 18th century, still before the emergence of modern Hindi. Bande akhtiyar bhala. So man, this decision is correct. And then just the last line, Kahi Haridasa Karta Kiya Suhua Sumera Achala Chala. So whatever the Karta did, the creator, Karta, creator did, that happened. And even the Achala, the immovable Sumera, the immovable Meru mountain, Chala, went if the creator wanted it. Right. And then a Rechta production goes on. This is one of the most popular early works of Rechta, the Bikat Kahani. Here, Rechta is not the Urdu type Rechta, but it has sometimes a line in Persian, line in Hindustani, and then half line Persian, half line Hindustani, sometimes Hindustani line interspersed with Persian or Perso-Arabic vocabulary. Also, Jafar Zatalli was a great early poet of pre-standardization Urdu, who composed satirical poetry from the time of Aurangzeb and during the succession wars, and in fact was executed. His poetry was so powerful that enraged the Sultan of the time. Yes, can I just ask for a moment break? I am back in half a minute.
Sure, sir. Until then, I'll keep them entertained. So, people who are watching us, thank you so much for joining in. We will have Dr. Bangha back with us in a few moments' time. But tonight at 9 p.m., we are also hosting another live conversation with one of India's best actors, Shabana Azmi. We are hosting a retrospective on her. So um, we hope that you all can join us at 9 p.m. India time on YouTube on this very channel to join us for a conversation with Mrs. Azmi, and we will explore her career in cinema and her work and other things. So thank you so much. And we are just waiting to join us.
Yes, thank you. So, um, the appearance of prose in Hindustani, that's really something that this is based on Ramvilas Sharma's research. Um, and Also, I would like to draw your attention to the research of Sajid Nizami, a very bright Pakistani scholar who surveyed Persian script prose texts before standardized Urdu. Also, David Lorenzen has discovered a missionary text in this standardized version in pre-standardized Hindi from the middle of the 17th century. So I just talk a little bit about the prose before wrapping up. Yeah, so this is what we find at a first look, combining the findings of the three scholars. The earliest prose work in Khariboli is Bhagwan Das's Gita Vartik from 1699, so just the last year of the 17th century, or the second last. And then there is Karbal Katha, which was produced in 1731 and 1748. And then, so the Karbal Katha is in the Urdu script. All the other works will be in the Nagari script. So Mukhdas of Punjab, Garbha Gita, Sargita, Ram Prasad Niranjani, Shankaracharya, Shastri Yadunat, Giuseppe Maria da Guarniano, that's the missionary in North India, in Bihar, who produced a Jawab Sawal, Ek Christian or Ek Hindu ke beech, Mo means me, Iman ke upar, so about faith. And then Harivansha, 1766. All this pre-Fort William College, quite a lot before Fort William College. And most Nagari texts are Hindu religious stories or treatises, including 3 on the Gita, as well as a treatise on palmistry, the Samudrik. And an interesting feature of the prose is that Rekhta poetry is mixed language. The prose uses Sanskritized Hindi. And this was, I think this is a great discovery by Ramvilas Sharma, that the Sanskritized Hindi just predates Fort William College. This prose may admit Braj features, and probably these works served as examples for Lallu Lal. So it is not a British invention, but in fact, Lallu Lal produced Prem Sagar early, but Fort William College was reluctant to publish it, and Fort William College published Braj Bhasha and Urdu works, and Lallu Lal really had to push hard to get Prem Sagar published in 1810, 7 years after it was composed, and when Gilchrist was back to Britain. So how does early prose in the Nagari script in Hindustani look? अर्जुन श्री कृष्ण भगवान पास पूछता है, श्री कृष्ण उत्तर देते हैं, श्री कृष्ण जी की आज्ञा है कि जो कोई इस गर्भ गीता को मन लाए कर पाठ सुने, तिसके निकट जम किंकर आवे नहीं. Those who know Hindi or Urdu can see that it is very much the same linguistic world of modern Hindi, with archaisms, and these archaisms are close to Braj Bhasha. For example, tiske nikat jamakinkar aave nahi. Tiske standing for uske, or ave is a proper Braj Bhasha form. And Anantavrat Katha from 1766 reads almost the same as Lalulal in its linguistic feel. और जो इस कथा को सुनते और पढ़ते हैं वे सब पापों से छूट कर विष्णु लोक को चले जाते हैं। श्री कृष्ण भगवान बोले हे युधिष्ठिर, जो पवित्र प्राणी संसार सागर की गुफा में सुख से विचरने की इच्छा करते हैं वे अनंत देव का पूजन करके अपने दाहिने हाथ में अनंत का उत्तम डोरा बांधते हैं। It sounds like modern Hindi discursive prose with just a modicum of archaism. And I haven't surveyed Urdu prose. I was just showing you one example. That's the Karbal Katha, but there are many examples. And also, I want to draw your attention to this: the missionary work in Khari Boli Hindi from the 1751 and it was never published, but it has two manuscripts still available, and it was never published in its own time, but David Lorenzen has published it about 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So it's northwestern Bihar, and it is a Capuchin friend and colleague and an unnamed Brahmin teacher. The language is called Hindu Boli, and the treatise was prepared to be presented to the Raja of Betia and then to be distributed amongst Hindus, because there was a missionary belief that if we can present our tenets in writing, that will be just powerful and might lead to conversion. So how does this mid-18th century Hindi prose by a missionary with the help of a Brahmin friend look? परमेश्वर ने आदमियों को पैदा करी के उन्हों को एक ईमान दिया है, संसार को समझाने को किस काम के वास्ते हम लोगों को दुनिया में रखा है, etc. as it goes. So again, you can see our linguistic register with the archaic form. This is how the manuscript looks. And just the use of Hindustani for official purposes also emerges in the 18th century. Probably it was used earlier, but I have primarily worked with literary texts, and those who work with administrative texts would find more Hindustani probably. But here there is a certificate of the inhabitants of Benares addressed to Warren Hastings in support of Ali Ibrahim Khan, the governor of Benares. So it was produced sometime between 1781 and 1785, because Ali Ibrahim Khan started to be governor in 81, and Warren Hastings was present until 85. So late 17th century, and I am showing you this text here now in big. Nawab Amir ul Mamalik Governor General, it should be General General बहादुर के इकबाल से वो प्रजा के भाग से नवाब इब्राहिम अली खां वहाँ दूर काशी के बहादुर काशी के हाकिम हैं। ईश्वर ये हाकिमी दाइम दाइम का कायम रहे. So This is an official document, and you see the seals of so many authorities around it. Here is a translation and a transliteration of what I was just struggling to read. जो लिखा है सो सब सही, सब ब्राह्मण राजी हैं, आशीर्वाद देते हैं कि कंपनी सलामत रहे जिसके राज में एता सुख है. And the company appears. And there is the emergence of Urdu. And I argue that even if the company was present from the early 17th century onwards, the Urdu, and sorry again, Zabane Urdu e Mualla, there is a typo, sorry about that. So Urdu appeared as the first standardized language of North India without colonial intervention. And that's quite unique in the history of North Indian languages, which became standardized under print modernity, but Urdu not. Urdu was standardized in a different way, and that would mark, on the one hand, the end of the use of Rekhta and of Hindustani. So Wali Dakkani's Divan takes Delhi by storm. These are Shamsur Rahman Farooqi's words. And then there is an ideological framework for standardization that is worked out by Sirajuddin Ali Khan Arzu and Shah Hatim. And Shah Hatim is particularly important for purifying the language. Shah Hatim says that Perso-Arabic pronunciation is favored over indigenous ways. So don't say jar, you should say zar. Also, he removes Hindavi Bhakha words, and he puts emphasis on established idiom over bookish idiom. This is something unclear, and Shamsur Rahman Farooqi also notes that it's unclear what he means by that. And I would add that the possibility of writing the language in the Nagari script is ignored. And also, Urdu goes for Perso-Arabicized spelling and not spelling according to South Asian pronunciation. So, for example, Fazal should be written with a Zoe and not with a Z. So they would distinguish between the various Arabic characters in writing, even if in pronunciation in South Asia there is no difference, but the Perso-Arabic spellings are preferred. And I would also like to investigate whether the consolidation of the postpositional system comes from this time of Urdu. For example, ke zariye and ke mare, etc., ke bare me, all seem to be rather late additions to the Hindustani, Hindi, Urdu language as it develops into two different branches. There is a poetic tradition that swiftly emerges after Wali, Dard, Mir, Sauda, Mir Hassan, etc. And initially, this is just the Zabane Urdu e Mualla, the language of the exalted court of Delhi. And Mir says, I'm writing in the language that people on the stairways of the Jama Masjid speak, so even in the center of Delhi. And then there is emergence of new centers, first Lucknow, and then it goes on to other centers like Hyderabad, Lahore, etc. And Shah Alam II returns to Delhi, and Urdu, along with Persian, is recognized as the language of power. This is Shamsur Rahman Farooqi's argument. And as soon as the language is recognized, it takes up the name of Zabane Urdu e Mualla, and then there is a grammar in Urdu, in Persian, of the Urdu grammar by Insha'Allah Khan, who is pictured here. And this is the end of Hindustani on the Urdu side. Hindi will be standardized almost along the same lines, but Perso-Arabic is substituted by Sanskrit. And the standardization happens almost 100 years after the standardization of Urdu, and there the standardization is linked to print modernity. Rekhta poetry survives until the first half of the 19th century, and after that it disappears under the influence of the two newly emerging languages. So this is what I wanted to tell you about Hindustani, which has been invisible and also invisibilized because it was neither in the agenda of the Hindi histories or of Urdu histories to talk about this language and its literary version, which is called Rekhta in North India. So thank you for your attention. And if there are questions, I will be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Banga, for this brilliant lecture and much needed lecture, actually, because what is happening in the nation is that we are trying to purify the language. We are trying to remove all sorts of foreign influences to the language, so called, and try to Sanskritize or Arabize the language. And that has been going on in both the extreme camps, in both the two major religions in the nation today. And I think that has been going on for a very long time because as modern Hindi was projected as a British project, from there on to now what we see today, the linguistic politics in India. I would now request Chandni from Karwan team to lead the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Professor Banga. I have a lot of questions, but I know that there is a paucity of time. So thank you very much for this very, very important lecture. So I'll start with a few questions of my own. Two questions, and if time allows, if you have 5 minutes, then I'll ask one more. So my question was when Shah, for the most recent point that you mentioned, that when Shah Hatim prefers the Perso-Arabic tradition over indigenous ways, we also study that there is difference between the Persian pronunciation of words and Arabic pronunciation of words, Rosa, Rodha, Ramzan, Ramadan. So what within the Perso-Arabic tradition, what was his preference when he says that you should speak in the Perso-Arabic tradition?
So he would go for what I'm not Persianist, but what would have been probably an archaic Persian pronunciation. So not the modern pronunciation in which you would say mushkel instead of mushkil. So he would go for a more archaic Persian pronunciation, but not for the proper Arabic pronunciation of Ramadan, etc. So it is, he accommodates the language to South Asia, but at the same time makes it clear that at least the Persian extra sounds, z, f, r, ha, are present in the language. And that's, in fact, these are additional sounds in Urdu that haven't been there in South Asian languages, but have been successfully indigenized. And in fact, for proper Urdu pronunciation, you cannot say ka, and you cannot say ga when ha and ra are meant. They would say you are speaking Hindi if you don't say ra.
And so that brings me to question, like you said in the lecture also, the Hindi and Urdu construct is very nascent. So when India had just gained independence and was partitioned in 47, people who were speaking and writing Urdu in the Urdu script at that point, were they speaking Hindustani or were they speaking Urdu in Perso-Arabic script or Hindi in Perso-Arabic script? What was the language that the people of the 40s in India were using, British India were using?
Probably there would be various registers. I would expect most people to use Hindustani, so a free mixture of Perso-Arabic words. However, conscious writers, when writing even letters, not just published works, they would go into one direction or another. And a good example is Prem Chand. He has produced short stories in Urdu, and he is a great short story writer in Urdu. And if you look up an anthology of Urdu short stories, you will see Prem Chand's name very much at the beginning. And Hindi walas would say, well, Prem Chand is a Hindi short story writer. He produced the two. And in fact, I think Harish Trivedi mentions that he was a protagonist of Hindustani. in principle, but what he did in practice was producing works in Urdu and in rather Sanskritized Hindi with a modicum of Urdu, but his Hindi is quite high Sanskritic, and I teach Hindi, and I see how students struggle with the high Sanskrit words, and those who went through Hindi classes also know that Premchand might be difficult because of the Sanskrit. So I would say that there are recordings of Grierson's linguistic survey, which might be some indication about the spoken language. But when you are asked to produce a text, your mindset might be that I should produce in the highest register. And it might be different from the informal register that you would use in the bazaar. I don't really know, but I would say that Hindustani has been used and is still used by many people, but when they write, they would write in Hindi or in Urdu. There have been attempts to write in Hindustani, and Horiod produced a history of the Hindi language in Hindustani, a beautiful book, but there was no following up to this scholarship in Hindustani, in the mixed language. And nowadays there are Hindi writers, for example, I love Arka Saraugi's style, who mixes so freely Perso-Arabic vocabulary into her style. And there are many others who are writing in this register. This is what feels probably more natural than a highly Sanskritized register. But at the same time, there might be people who prefer Sanskritized register, and there might be others who prefer more Arabicized register. And in a way, this is a question of registers. Yes, I don't know whether I was able to answer your question.
Sir, I understand this, but what I'm thinking is I'm learning Persian these days, and the teacher says Keichi is for scissors, Mees is for desk, and those are the words that I've been using in my everyday conversation with my friends, with my teachers. So are normal people or the people of the 21st century also mixing those registers unknowingly? Persian words, Arabic words, Hindi words, Sanskrit words in their everyday conversation?
Absolutely, absolutely. You can't speak Hindi without Persian.
Hmm.
People may not know that when you say, मैं बोलता हूँ कि वो मेरा दोस्त है,
Yeah.
कि ये Persian है.
Ah.
So you cannot use the Hindi language without Persian. Also, ke bare mein, Persian. You cannot use. They are so deeply intertwined.
So, sir, can we say that the modern day speakers of Hindi and Urdu are speaking a revised or evolved version of Hindustani?
Absolutely, yes, yes. It's a standardization, and if you remember, in the beginning of my talk, I talked about language buildup. And it
Yes.
is, I would say that grammatically, the two are the same languages with two different build-ups. So culturally different, linguistically one. So if you approach the two from the cultural side, and many people, especially on the Urdu side, would very vehemently say that Urdu is different from Hindi, while people on the Hindi side would say, well, Urdu is just a register of Hindi. So there is also a difference in approach.
Sir, if I had a few more, one question, if I could ask that, or
Sure.
should we wrap it up? I just
Yes.
wanted to say, oh, thank you very much, sir. So, this is so informative, and this I really feel is a godsend lecture, because I've been thinking about ever since I started learning Farsi. I don't know what language I'm speaking. So thank you very much for organizing this lecture. It puts everything into perspective. So, sir, the other question I wanted to know was that Babur, even though Babur as a king, is he speaking in Farsi with his family, or is he speaking in Chagatai Turkish with his family, or is he also speaking Hindustani at that point of time?
So he has two divans to his name, one in Chagatai and one in Persian. And well, it might depend on the family members. He might have had Tajik Persian-speaking wives and Turki-speaking wives. It may not have been the literary version. So Chagatai is the literary version of Turkish, of Central Asian Turkish. So he might have been familiar with various registers, but he has got a divan in literary Chagatai and also in Persian. And from this couplet, we also see that well, from the Babur Nama, we see that he was familiar with so many Hindustani words, and probably this couplet was produced late in his life when he has been exposed to Hindustani, and he might have been learning it, but he didn't really get through the ta difference.
Thank you very much, sir. I did have a couple of questions, but I realized that we've already gone way beyond time. So if you allow, could I please email those questions to you? Because I know that you're hard pressed for time right now.
Yes, please
But
do so. So thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Banga. There is an interesting question though, and I think we would end with that. It's a big controversial question, so to say. It is, did Urdu Rekha travel from north to south or from south to north?
Well, so Hindustani as a lingua franca first traveled from south to north, and I would like to direct the people to Joshua Pien's doctoral dissertation from the University of Pennsylvania, who convincingly argues that the linguistic base of Dakkani is Dehlavi. And it's an archaic Dehlavi, and we have seen the archaisms also in Rechta. The same archaisms appear, or similar archaisms appear in the south. However, for literary purposes, Hindustani was used as Dakkani prior to being used as Gujri or Rechta. We have got Padam Rao, a very early Dakkani work from the first half of the 15th century. So that's, in a way, the language is based in Delhi, but the literature emerges first in the south. And I might even be able to argue that the Mahdavis and their connection with Gujarat, and then Babur's campaign to Gujarat, might have made Babur realize that this Hindustani can be used for poetry. And then, since Babur used it, then his courtiers also used it just for jokes or a kind of extempore poetry. But when the Mughal court used it, then also people outside the Mughal courts, like Dadu Dayal and others, started to use it for literary purposes. So, in a way, the traveling was two ways. Language traveled south, literature traveled north.
That's a brilliant answer, and thanks to you for this brilliant and much needed lecture today on Karwan. And I think it is because of you and your colleagues like Rupert Snell and Alison Bush and Piret Lutkindorf that we got to learn so much about the other languages in the Mughal court or otherwise among the masses and among the nobility. So I think we owe to all of you for enlightening us with these brilliant lectures. Thank you so much, Dr. Banga, and I look forward to hosting you in India for an offline lecture whenever you come to Delhi.
Thank you, and thank you everyone who joined this talk today.
Thank you so much, everybody. We will be back online at 9 p.m. We are going to take an hour break before the next session. Do join us and keep reading, keep questioning, keep thinking. That's how you will keep yourself sane in these insane times. And thank you so much.